In the mud-choked trenches of the First World War, one rifle earned a reputation that would haunt its creators for generations. Soldiers cursed it, officers condemned it, men died because of it. Yet this same weapon, despised by infantrymen across the Western Front, helped forge one of the deadliest snipers the Great War would ever know. This is the story of the Ross rifle, a weapon born from national pride, undone by battlefield reality, and redeemed by the hands of marksmen who turned its critical flaws into unexpected advantages. The Ross rifle represents one of the most profound contradictions in military history. It was a rifle so accurate it won international shooting competitions, so finely crafted that target shooters praised its engineering, so precisely manufactured that Canada proudly displayed it as proof of industrial sophistication. Yet when Canadian soldiers carried it into combat, it became a serious liability. It jammed in the mud. It failed during rapid fire. Its bolt could be assembled incorrectly in ways that turned the weapon into a catastrophic hazard. Entire battalions threw their Ross rifles into the muck and scavenged Lee Enfields from British corpses just to survive. How could a rifle so fundamentally unsuited for trench warfare produce one of the most effective snipers in the history of modern combat? The answer lies not in the weapon's strengths, but in understanding exactly why it failed, and recognizing the narrow circumstances under which those failures became irrelevant. At the dawn of the 20th century, Canada stood at a crossroads of identity. The nation had spent decades relying on British arms, British training, British military doctrine. Every rifle carried by Canadian soldiers bore the stamp of British factories. For a country seeking to establish itself as more than a colonial extension, this dependence rankled. Military independence meant industrial independence, and industrial independence required a rifle that bore the mark "Made in Canada." The driving force behind this ambition was Sir Sam Hughes, Canada's Minister of Militia and Defence. Hughes was a complex figure, fiercely patriotic, politically ruthless, and convinced that Canada could produce a rifle superior to anything the British Empire had fielded. He found his instrument in Sir Charles Henry Augustus, Frederick Lockhart Ross, a Scottish aristocrat and inventor who had designed a straight-pull bolt-action rifle that promised revolutionary advantages over traditional turn-bolt designs. The Ross rifle, designated the Mark II and later the Mark III, embodied precision engineering at its finest. Charles Ross built his weapon around the concept of minimal moving parts and maximum accuracy. The straight-pull bolt mechanism allowed a shooter to chamber rounds without rotating the bolt handle, theoretically enabling faster follow-up shots than the Lee Enfield's traditional turn-bolt action. The barrel was long, heavy, and manufactured to match grade tolerances. The rifling was cut with obsessive precision. On a target range, under controlled conditions, the Ross rifle could achieve groupings that made British military rifles look crude by comparison. Canada adopted the weapon with enormous pride. Here was proof that Canadian industry could compete with British gunmakers. Here was a rifle that won prizes at Bisley, the world's most prestigious shooting competition. Orders flowed to the Ross Rifle Company factory in Quebec City. By 1914, when the Great War erupted, tens of thousands of Ross rifles had been manufactured. Canadian soldiers marched to war, carrying a weapon their government believed would prove Canadian excellence on the world stage. The British military establishment watched with deep skepticism. British ordnance experts had examined the Ross design and identified fundamental problems. The tight tolerances that made it accurate also made it fragile. The straight-pull bolt, while fast in theory, lacked the camming power of a turn-bolt action to force extraction of dirty or swollen cartridges. The rifle was chambered for the .303 British cartridge, a rimmed round that the Lee Enfield handled adequately, but which created pressure and extraction issues in the Ross's chamber design. British officers quietly warned their Canadian counterparts that precision target rifles and combat rifles required entirely different engineering philosophies. Sam Hughes dismissed these concerns as British jealousy. Canada would prove the doubters wrong on the battlefield. The Ross rifle's mechanical design read like a masterpiece on paper. In the reality of trench warfare, it became a catalogue of problems written in blood and mud. The weapon's fundamental problem was philosophical. Charles Ross had designed a target rifle and tried to adapt it for military service. Target shooting occurs on clean ranges with carefully maintained ammunition under controlled conditions. Trench warfare occurred in environments that turned rifles into clogged, filth-encrusted clubs within hours. The straight-pull bolt mechanism, so elegant in concept, proved deeply problematic in practice. Unlike the Lee Enfield's rotating bolt that used camming action to force stuck cases free, the Ross bolt pulled directly backward. When mud entered the chamber, when carbon fouling built up from rapid fire, when brass cases expanded from heat, the Ross bolt often stopped moving. Soldiers found themselves struggling with frozen bolts while German infantry advanced across no man's land. The rifle's match-grade tolerances, its source of peacetime accuracy, became instruments of failure in combat. The Ross was manufactured with gaps measured in thousandths of an inch, perfect for preventing any play that might affect accuracy, disastrous for allowing mud and debris to pass through the action. The Lee Enfield, built with deliberately loose tolerances, shrugged off mud. The Ross choked on it. Extraction failures plagued the weapon. The .303 British cartridge used a rimmed case design that worked adequately in the Lee Enfield's generously chambered action. In the Ross's tight chamber, those rims created problems. Soldiers reported case heads tearing off, leaving the brass body stuck in the chamber with no way to extract it. Men died performing immediate action drills on jammed weapons, while enemy soldiers who faced no such problems fired freely. Then came the bolt assembly issue, a flaw that, while not common, was dangerous enough to become infamous. The Ross bolt could be disassembled for cleaning and, in certain circumstances, reassembled incorrectly with the bolt head rotated 180 degrees from its proper orientation. A rifle assembled this way would chamber a round, it would fire, and then the bolt could blow backward into the shooter's face with devastating force. While the frequency of such incidents remains debated by historians, the documented cases were catastrophic enough, facial trauma, blinding death, that soldiers learned to check each other's weapons obsessively. The fact that such a failure mode existed at all represented a fundamental design flaw that eroded confidence in the weapon. The Canadian Expeditionary Force discovered these problems in the worst possible classroom. At the Second Battle of Ypres in April 1915, Canadian soldiers faced the first major German chlorine gas attack of the war. Already struggling against poison clouds and overwhelming enemy fire, they found large numbers of their Ross rifles jamming. Soldiers abandoned their issued rifles and grabbed Lee Enfields from British and Canadian dead. After action reports documented the crisis in brutal detail, officers reported significant numbers of weapons failing to function when rapid fire was most desperately needed. The comparison with the British Lee Enfield became impossible to ignore. The Enfield was not a target rifle, its accuracy was merely adequate. Its tolerances were loose enough that parts rattled. But in the mud of Flanders it worked. A soldier could drop it in a shell crater, pull it out caked in filth, work the action a few times, and fire. The Ross required cleaning and maintenance that no soldier under fire could provide. By late 1915, Canadian infantry battalions were in near revolt. Soldiers were discarding Ross rifles and taking Lee Enfields from any source they could find. Some units reported that fewer than half their men still carried the weapon they had been issued. The Ross rifle was not just failing, it was undermining the combat effectiveness of the Canadian Corps. Yet in this litany of failure, a strange truth emerged. The Ross rifle was among the most accurate rifles on the Western Front when used under the right conditions. That long, heavy barrel and those tight tolerances that made it poorly suited for infantry work made it devastatingly effective for one specific role: sniping. A sniper occupies a carefully prepared position. A sniper cleans and maintains weapons with obsessive care. A sniper fires individual, carefully aimed shots rather than rapid strings of fire. A sniper operates in precisely the controlled environment that the Ross rifle demanded. In static positions behind Canadian lines, snipers equipped with Ross rifles began achieving results that seemed remarkable. The weapon's inherent accuracy, combined with high-quality optics and match-grade ammunition, made it capable of precision that most Lee Enfield snipers could not match. At ranges beyond 600 yards, the Ross's superior barrel and tighter chamber tolerances translated into smaller groups and more consistent point of impact. This is where Francis Pega-Magabo enters the story, not as its protagonist, but as proof of the Ross rifle's bizarre dual nature. Pega-Magabo was an Anishinaabe soldier from the Parry Island Band in Ontario. He enlisted in the Canadian Expeditionary Force in August 1914 and served with the 1st Battalion. His background included extensive hunting and tracking experience. He understood fieldcraft, patience, and marksmanship at a level that military training could enhance but not create. He was exactly the kind of soldier who could exploit a weapon's strengths while avoiding its weaknesses. Early in the war, Pega-Magabo used a Ross rifle. As the Canadian Corps transitioned to the Lee Enfield for infantry use, snipers often had access to both weapons and selected whichever rifle best suited their needs. In the hands of an average infantryman required to maintain rapid fire under chaotic conditions, the Ross was nearly worthless. In the hands of a sniper who could select his moment, control his environment, and maintain his weapon religiously, it became something else entirely. The records are fragmentary and complicated by the informal nature of sniper kill confirmation during the Great War, but traditional estimates credit Pega-Magabo with more than 300 confirmed hits, though precise documentation remains elusive. He combined the Ross rifle's mechanical accuracy with an understanding of battlefield geometry, light, wind, and human behavior that turned him into one of the most effective snipers the war produced. His indigenous tracking skills translated seamlessly into the patient observation and stalking that defined elite sniping. He could remain motionless for hours, waiting for the single perfect shot that the Ross rifle, for all its flaws in other roles, could deliver with devastating precision. Pega-Magabo's effectiveness illustrated the essential paradox. The Ross was not a bad rifle in absolute terms. It was a rifle designed for the wrong war, issued to the wrong troops, used in the wrong circumstances. But in the narrow band of conditions where its strengths mattered and its weaknesses became irrelevant, it achieved results that justified every claim its designers had made. This made the rifle's overall failure even more tragic. The same engineering that could produce such precision in one role became a liability in every other. Canadian snipers valued it highly. Canadian infantrymen died because of it. By early 1916, the Ross rifle's battlefield record had become impossible to defend. British commanders were openly demanding its removal from Canadian frontline units. Canadian officers who had initially supported the weapon were filing reports that bordered on insubordination in their criticism. Soldiers were writing letters home, describing the rifle in terms that would have constituted mutiny if applied to officers. Sam Hughes fought a rearguard political battle to save his cherished weapon. He blamed inadequate training. He blamed soldiers for improper maintenance. He blamed British prejudice against Canadian innovation. He fought with British generals, with his own subordinates, with anyone who suggested the Ross rifle was fundamentally unsuited for trench warfare. The evidence against him became overwhelming. Casualty reports, after-action analyses, the simple fact that Canadian soldiers were abandoning their issued weapons in significant numbers. In August 1916, the Canadian Corps officially replaced the Ross rifle with the Lee Enfield as its standard infantry weapon. The decision came too late for the Canadian soldiers who had died fighting with unreliable rifles. It came as an admission that national pride had overruled military necessity. Hughes resigned in November 1916, his political career destroyed by his stubborn defense of an indefensible weapon. The Ross rifle did not entirely disappear from Canadian service. It remained in sniper roles where its accuracy continued to make it valuable. It saw use in training establishments. Some rear echelon troops continued to carry it. But as an infantry weapon, it was finished. The rifle that was supposed to prove Canadian industrial superiority had instead become a symbol of political interference with military effectiveness. Today, the Ross rifle occupies a strange place in military history and firearms collecting. Original examples command high prices from collectors who appreciate the quality of manufacture and the weapon's target shooting accuracy. Museums display it as an example of early 20th century Canadian industry. Military historians study it as a cautionary tale about the gap between peacetime testing and combat reality. The engineering lessons from the Ross failure influenced rifle design for decades. Firearms designers learned that reliability trumps precision in military rifles. Loose tolerances became a feature, not a flaw. Simplicity of maintenance became a design requirement. The ability to function when dirty, damaged, and abused became more valuable than the ability to shoot one-hole groups on a pristine range. Yet the Ross also demonstrated that context determines value. In one role, it was among the least suitable rifles fielded during the Great War. In another, it was arguably among the best. This duality makes it unique in firearms history, a weapon that was simultaneously a significant failure and a remarkable success, depending entirely on who held it and how they used it. The Ross rifle's story is ultimately about the danger of allowing politics and national pride to override practical battlefield testing. Sam Hughes wanted a rifle that symbolized Canadian achievement. Charles Ross built a rifle that demonstrated engineering sophistication. Neither man adequately considered what soldiers needed when fighting for their lives in conditions that destroyed precision instruments. The result was a weapon that endangered the men it was supposed to protect. But it is also about the strange alchemy that occurs when exceptional skill meets a tool designed for a specific purpose. Francis Pegamagabau and other Canadian snipers found in the Ross rifle exactly what they needed. The weapon's flaws did not matter in their hands because they operated outside the circumstances where those flaws were critical. They proved that no weapon is absolutely good or bad, only more or less suited to its task. The answer to the question posed by this documentary's title is both simple and complex. One of the least suitable infantry rifles produced one of the war's most effective snipers, because worst and best depend entirely on context. For infantry work, the Ross was indeed poorly suited for the conditions of the Great War. For sniping under controlled circumstances, it was potentially among the finest rifles available. Pegamagabau's achievement was recognizing which role demanded which qualities and exploiting the Ross's strengths while avoiding its weaknesses. The Ross rifle remains a reminder that engineering brilliance without practical wisdom produces failure. That national pride without battlefield reality costs lives. But also that a flawed tool, in hands skilled enough to use it properly, can still change history. It stands as both warning and inspiration, a weapon that failed in one role yet succeeded magnificently in another, depending entirely on who fired it and why. If you enjoyed this look into military history, make sure to subscribe for more stories about legendary and forgotten weapons. Tell us in the comments what firearm you would like to see next. Your suggestion might inspire our next episode.